We are going to read today chapter 3 of Mice and Men. And so I'm going to talk about the text and relate it to some of our themes while we are reading so that you can go back and do a second read with annotations using your metacognitive bookmarks and skills relating to our themes so we can use our reading in our writing. So we are on your document, page 20. We're on page 20. I added a little A right here with a text box because for some reason those first letters don't show up. So I'm going to read, I'm going to talk about the text, and then we are going to go back, do a second read for annotations and analysis. Before I get going, I have my text open, I have my bookmark open. So I know I have to be looking for these things. I want to make predictions. I want to visualize. I want to reflect and relate. I want to evaluate. So before I even start reading, I know these are the things I'm looking for. I'm also going to review our themes that we're thinking about while we're reading so that I know, okay, I just read a piece of text. I think that works really well with broken plans, the American dream, friendship and companionship, or minorities and stereotyping. So have those in my mind. I'm on track to remember. I'm looking for a text to meet those things. And then knowing in the back of my mind, I have to be going back for a second read to write those notes. Broken plans, the American dream, friendship and companionship, minorities and stereotyping. All right, so on page 20, chapter 3. Although there was evening brightness showing through the windows of the bunkhouse, inside it was dusk. Through the open door came the thuds and occasional clings of a horseshoe game, and now and then the sound of voices raised in approval or derision. Slim and George came into the darkening bunkhouse together. Slim reached up over the card table and turned on the tin-shaded electric light. Instantly, the table was brilliant with light, and the cone of the shade threw its brightness straight downward, leaving the corners of the bunkhouse still in dusk. Slim sat down on a box, and George took his place opposite. "It wasn't nothin'," said Slim. "I would have had to drown most of 'em anyways. No need to thank me about that." George said, "It wasn't much to you, maybe, but it was a hell of a lot to him. Jesus Christ, I don't know how we're gonna get him to sleep in here. He'll want to sleep right out in the barn with them. We'll have trouble keeping him from getting right in the box with them pups." "It wasn't nothing," Slim repeated. "Say, you sure was right about him. Maybe he ain't bright, but I never seen such a worker. He damn near killed his partner bucking barley. There ain't nobody can keep up with him. God almighty, I never seen such a strong guy." George spoke proudly. "Just tell Lenny what to do, and he'll do it if it don't take no figuring. He can't think of nothing to do himself, but he sure can take orders." There was a clang of horseshoe on iron stake outside, and a little cheer of voices. Slim moved back slightly so the light was not on his face. "Funny how you and him string along together." It was Slim's calm invitation to confidence. "What's funny about it?" George demanded defensively. "Oh, I don't know. Hardly none of the guys ever travel together. I hardly never seen two guys travel together. You know how the hands are. They just come in and get their bunk and work a month, and then they quit and go out alone. Never seem to give a damn about nobody. It just seems kind of funny a cuckoo like him and a smart little guy like you traveling together." "He ain't no cuckoo," said George. "He's dumb as hell, but he ain't crazy. And I ain't so bright neither, or I wouldn't be bucking barley for my 50 and found. If I was bright, if I even a little bit smart, I'd have my own little place and be bringing in my own crops instead of doing all the work and not getting what comes up out of the ground." George fell silent. He wanted to talk. Slim neither encouraged nor discouraged him. He just sat back quiet and receptive. So let's pause 2 places here we can kind of relate to our themes. The first one is friendship and companionship, and the second one is the American dream. So let's look back. So Slim is talking about Lenny and George being together, and he's talking about how the two guys don't normally travel together. I'm looking for markup. And the reason why, right, during the Great Depression, it was really difficult to support yourself. And so it was a very lonely time. And so we have to keep thinking about why George and Lenny kind of sacrificed so they can be together and what their friendship and companionship means to each other. So that would be a really good place for that sort of note when you go back. The second one is when George is talking about how he kind of sees this future that is unattainable, something he can't get because of the situation he's in. He's talking about having his own ranch. And that's been the dream of Lenny and George as they were talking in these last two chapters of what they could do with the money they earn if they just work hard enough. And that's kind of what the American dream is. So there's two pieces there for us. Purple is sort of that companionship. Yellow here is where we see the American dream. So you can go back and do those notes. It ain't so funny, me and him going around together, George said at last. Him and me was both born in Auburn. I know his Aunt Clara, she took him when he was a baby and raised him up. When his Aunt Clara died, Lenny just come along with me out working. Got kind of used to each other after a little while. Said Slim. George looked over at Slim and saw the calm, godlike eyes fastened on him. Funny, said George. This is a really good place for characterization of Slim, too. Just to point that out, if we're thinking about characters. God-like, calm eyes, such good language for him. I used to have a hell of a lot of fun with him. Used to play jokes on him because he was too dumb to take care of himself, but he was too dumb even to know he had a joke played on him. I had fun. Made me seem goddamn smart alongside of him. Why'd he do any damn thing I told him to? If I told him to walk off over a cliff, over he'd go. That wasn't so damn much fun after a while. He never got mad about it neither. I've beat the hell out of him, and he could have just bust every bone in my body just with his hands, but he never lifted a finger against me. Oh, that's a really good characterization of Lenny, too, right? How strong he is, but also how compassionate he can be. George's voice was taking on the tone of confession. Tell you what made me stop that. One day a bunch of guys was standing around up on the Sacramento River. I was feeling pretty smart. I turns to Lenny and says, jump in. And he jumps. Couldn't swim a stroke. He damn near drowned before we could get him. And he was so damn nice to me for pulling him out. Clean forgot I told him to jump in. Well, I ain't done nothing like that no more. He's a nice fella, said Slim. Guy don't need no sense to be a nice fella. Seems to me sometimes it just works out the other way around. Take a real smart guy and he ain't hardly ever a nice fella. George stacked the scattered cards and began to lay out his solitaire hand. The shoes thudded on the ground outside. At the windows, the light of the evening still made the window squares bright. I want to pause here at this symbol of a solitaire hand. George is sitting right with Slim, such a nice guy, and probably could be a good friend. But George is still playing a game that's isolated. Solitaire, you play all by yourself. And so George is so used to, even though he's with Lenny, still being isolated and still being sort of defensive during this really difficult time in history. So solitaire and playing cards in isolation is this really good symbol of how removed George is from connecting with people, really. Very a defensive thing. I ain't got no people, George said, right? Kind of going back to that solitaire hand. I've seen the guys that go around on the ranches alone. That ain't no good. They don't have no fun. After a long time, they get mean. They get wanted to fight all the time. Yeah, they get mean, Slim said. They get so they don't want to talk to nobody. This is really good, too. If we're going to look at the idea of that isolation and how, so it's purple now, and how the loneliness affects these guys. They get cold-hearted, they get angry, they get sad. And so that's maybe why we have that companionship and friendship in Lenny and George. Because Lenny's a goddamn nuisance most of the time, said George, but you get used to going around with the guy and you can't get rid of him. He ain't mean, said Slim. I can see Lenny ain't a bit mean. Course he ain't mean, but he gets in trouble all the time because he's so goddamn dumb, like what happened in Weed. He stopped in the middle of turning over a card. George is protecting Lenny. He looked alarmed and peered over at Slim. You wouldn't tell nobody? What are you doing, Weed? Slim asked calmly. You wouldn't tell? No, of course you wouldn't. What he doing, Weed? Slim asked again. Well, he's seen this girl in a red dress. Dumb bastard like he is. He wants to touch everything he likes, just wants to feel it. So he reaches out to feel this red dress, and the girl lets out a squawk and lets Lenny all mixed up, and he holds on because that's the only thing he can think to do while this girl squawks and squawks. I was just a little bit off, and I heard the yelling, so I comes running, and by that time Lenny's so scared, all he can think to do is just hold on. I socked him over the head with a fence picket to make him let go. He was so scared he couldn't let go of that dress. And he's so goddamn strong, you know? Slim's eyes were level and unwinking. A really good place to think about Slim's character. Very calm. He nodded very slowly. So what happens? George carefully bit his line of solitaire cards. Still solitaire cards removed. He's relating to Slim, right? He's telling him his problems, but he's still really isolated in solitaire all by himself. Well, that girl rabbits or runs away, too, and tells the law she'd been raped. The guys in Weed start a party out to lynch Lenny or really violently kill him. So we sit in an irrigation ditch underwater all the rest of that day, got only your head sticking out of water and up under the grass that sticks out from the side of the ditch, and that night we scrammed out of there. Slim sat in silence for a moment. Didn't hurt the girl none, huh? He asked finally. Hell no. He just scared her. I'd be scared too if he grabbed me, but he never hurt her. He just wanted to touch that red dress. He wants to pet them pups all the time. He ain't mean, said Slim. I can tell mean guy a mile off. Course he ain't, and he'll do any damn thing Lenny come in through the door. He wore his blue denim coat over his shoulders like a cape, and he walked hunched way over. Hi, Lenny, says George. How you like that pup now? Lenny said breathlessly. He's brown and white, just like I wanted. He went directly to his bunk and lay down and turned his face to the wall and drew up his knees. George put down his cards very deliberately. So he put down solitaire because Lenny came in. So kind of now showing he's by Lenny and he's with him now. He's not in isolation if he has the companionship of Lenny. Lenny said sharply. Lenny twisted his neck and looked over his shoulder. Huh, what you want, George? I told you couldn't bring that pup in here. What pup, George? I ain't got no pup. George went quickly to him, grabbed him by the shoulder, and whirled him over. He reached down and picked the tiny puppy from where Lenny had been concealing it against his stomach. Lenny sat up quickly. Give him to me, George. George said, You ain't right. You get right up and take this pup back to the nest. He's got to sleep with his mother. You want to kill him? Just born last night, and you take him out of the nest. You take him back, or I'll tell Slim not to let you have him. So kind of like his parent, right? Taking care of him. He's not letting him do something, even though that's really what he wants. Lenny held out his hands pleadingly. Give him to me, George. I'll take him back. I didn't mean no harm, George. Honest, I didn't. I just want to pet him a little. George handed the pup to him. All right. You get him back there quick, and don't you take him out no more. You'll kill him the first thing you know. Lenny fairly scuttled out of the room. Slim had not moved. His calm eyes followed Lenny out the door. Jesus, he said. He just like a kid, ain't he? Which is like kind of a really good place for characterization or to show Lenny's character. Sure, he's just like a kid. There ain't no more harm in him than a kid. Neither, except he's so strong. I bet he won't come in here to sleep tonight. He'd sleep right alongside that barn and the backs in the barn. Well, let him. He ain't doing no harm out there. It was almost dark outside now. Old Candy the Swamper, the guy who kind of cleans up in the ranch, came in and went to his bunk, and behind him struggled his old dog. Remember we had that description of the dog about how he's kind in his eyes, but he's so old now he can hardly walk. He can't really eat anymore. He's struggling. He's in a lot of pain. But he's the companion of Candy. So we have this companionship and friendship theme. And it's not just Lenny and George, but also, or like this dog and Candy. And it's also, we're looking at sort of the lack of companionship. Sorry, just checking on my themes to make sure I'm not missing anything. Hello, Slim. Hello, George. Don't either of you play horseshoes? I don't like to play every night, said Slim. Candy went on. Either you guys got a slug of whiskey, I got a gut ache. I ain't, said Slim. I'd drink it myself if I had, and I ain't got a gut ache neither. Got a bad gut ache, said Candy. Them goddamn turnips give it to me. I knowed they was going to before I even eat them. So they were bad food, so they're kind of giving them bad food on the ranch, not really taking care of them. The thick bodies Carlson came in out of the darkening yard. So that's one of the guys who's like a worker on the ranch. He walked to the other end of the bunkhouse and turned on the second shaded light. Darker in hell in here, he said. Jesus, how that guy can pick shoes. He plenty good, said Slim. Damn right he is, said Carlson. He don't give nobody else a chance to win. Kind of like racism, sort of, what's our thing? So minority stereotyping. So the guy who works in the barn and takes care of those animals mostly kind of puts horseshoes on them or takes care of the equipment for the work horses and mules. Carlson's just kind of demeaning him and saying like he's just really good at horseshoes or at games in general, kind of stereotyping him. He stopped and sniffed in the air and, still sniffing, looked down at the old dog. God almighty, that dog stinks. Get him out of here, Candy. I don't know nothing that stinks as bad as that old dog. You get him out. So we just talked about how the dog is Candy's companion. And Candy is just very lonely. He's handicapped. He's missing a hand. So his job is to clean. And that's kind of really the only job he can have on a ranch. And so he's very lonely. He sees these guys coming in and out of the ranch, doesn't really make connections with them, but for a very much long time in his life, he's had this dog. And so Carlson comes out and says, like, that dog is gross, right? Candy's companion is just like disgusting. He doesn't deserve to be comfortable in this bunk. Candy rolled to the edge of his bed. He reached over and patted the ancient dog, and he apologized. I've been around him so much, I never noticed how he stinks. Well, I can't stand him in here, said Carlson. That stink hangs around even after he's gone. He walked over with his heavy leg stride and looked down at the dog. Got no teeth, he said. He's all stiff with rheumatism, so he can't hardly walk. His joints hurt when he walks. He ain't no good to you, Candy. He ain't no good to himself. Why don't you shoot him, Candy? All right, so this is a really good place to pause and think about, think about one of the ideas that we're going, that we're going to talk about, which is mercy killing. Okay, I'm just going to leave that yellow. So Carlson's saying your companion, your dog, is in so much pain and he's so old that it might be better to actually kill him and put him out of his misery than to keep him around. And this is heartbreaking for Candy because he's his companion in life. And so he's going to have to struggle with what's better for the dog, being a companion for Candy or not being in pain anymore. The old man squirmed uncomfortably. Well, hell, I had him so long, had him since he was a pup. I herded sheep with him, he said proudly. You wouldn't think it to look at him now, but he was the best damn sheepdog I ever seen. George said, I seen a guy in Weed that had an Airedale, could herd sheep, learned it from the other dogs. Carlson was not to be put off or sidetracked. Look, Candy, this old dog just suffers himself all the time. If you was to take him out and shoot him right in the back of the head, he leaned over and pointed, right here, why, he'd never know what hit him. So to shoot the dog in the head, right, very harsh sounding, but also it might be the most painless way to shoot a dog or to put him out of his misery, to kill him, because it would be instant and he wouldn't be suffering. Candy looked about unhappily. No, he said softly. No, I couldn't do that. I had him too long. He don't have no fun, Carlson insisted, and he stinks to beat hell. Tell you what, I'll shoot him for you. Then it won't be you that does it. Carlson, doesn't understand companionship. He's one of the ranch guys that comes in, works, leaves, doesn't make any sort of friends. He's really isolated. So he just can't understand this idea of the companionship of Candy with his dog. Candy threw his legs off the bunk. He scratched the white stubble whiskers on his cheek nervously. I'm so used to him, he said softly. I had him from a pup. Well, you ain't been kind to keeping him alive, said Carlson. Look, Slim's bitch got a litter right now. Female dog, literally. I bet Slim would give you one of them pups to raise up, wouldn't you, Slim? So get a new companion. The Skinner had been studying the old dog with his calm eyes. Yeah, he said, you can have a pup if you want to. He seemed to shake himself free for speech. Carl's right, Candy. That dog ain't no good to himself. I wish somebody'd shoot me if I get old and a cripple. So, Slim, Candy looked helplessly at him, for Slim's opinions were law. Remember how we've talked about how Slim is this godlike figure, and the first description of him is that he's very calm, kind, compassionate, very strong, respectable, has a lot of dignity. And so when Slim talks, everyone listens. And so we're going to have to listen to Slim, even as painful as this is going to be. Maybe it hurt him, he suggested. I don't mind taking care of him, said Candy. He's like kind of pleading desperately to keep his dog. Carlson said, the way I'd shoot him, he wouldn't feel nothing. I'd put the gun right here, he pointed with his toe, right back of the head. He wouldn't even quiver. Candy looked for help from face to face. It was quite dark outside by now. A young laboring man came in. His sloping shoulders were bent forward, and he walked heavily on his heels as though he carried the invisible grain bag. He went to his bunk and put his hat on his shelf. Then he picked up a pulp magazine from the shelf and brought it to the light over the table. Did I show you this, Slim? He asked. Show me what? The young man turned to the back of the magazine, put it down on the table, and pointed with his finger. Right there, read that. Slim bent over. Go on, said the young man. Read it out loud. Dear editor, Slim read slowly. Maybe because he's a working man, maybe reading's difficult for him. I read your mag for 6 years, and I think it's the best on the market. I like stories by Peter Rand. I think he is a wingding. Give us more like the Dark Rider. I don't write many letters, just thought I would tell you I think your mag is the best time's worth I ever spent. Slim looked up questioningly. What do you want me to read that for? Whit said, Go on. Read the name at the bottom. Slim read, For your success, William Tenner. He glanced up at Whit again. What'd you want me to read that for? Whit closed the magazine impressively. Don't you remember Bill Tenner? Worked here about 3 months ago. Slim thought. Little guy? He asked. Drove a cultivator? That's him, Whit cried. That's the guy. You think he's the guy that wrote this? I know it. Bill and me was in here one day. Bill had one of them books that just come in. He was looking at it, and he says, I wrote a letter. Wonder if they put it in the book. And it wasn't there. Bill says, maybe they're saving it for later. And that's just what they done. There it is. So this is another moment for companionship because these guys are so isolated, but all of a sudden he has this one guy that he can relate to and have this connection long term. And it's just so heartwarming to him, so exciting. Guess you're right, said Slim. Got it right in the book. George held out his hand for the magazine. Let's look at it. Whit found the place again, but he did not surrender his hold on it. It was so special and important to him to have this connection with this guy, even though it's so removed that he wouldn't give it up. He pointed out the letter with his forefinger, and then he went to his box shelf and laid the magazine carefully in. I wonder if Bill's seen it, he said. Bill and me worked in that patch of field peas. Run cultivators, both of us. Bill was a hell of a nice fella. During the conversation, Carlson had refused to be drawn in. He continued to look down at the old dog. He's like kind of getting obsessed with it. Candy watched him uneasily. At last, Carlson said, "If you want me to, I'll put the old devil out of his misery right now and get it over with. Ain't nothing left for him. Can't eat, can't see, can't even walk without hurting." Candy said hopefully, "You ain't got no gun?" Candy said, "Maybe tomorrow. Let's wait till tomorrow." "I don't see no reason for it," said Carlson. He went to his bunk, pulled his bag from underneath it, and took out a Luger pistol. "Let's get over with," he said. "We can sleep on it with him stinking around in here. So merciless, not kind at all." He put the pistol in his hip pocket. Candy looked a long time at Slim to try to find some reversal, and Slim gave him none. At last, Candy said softly and hopelessly, "All right, take him." He did not look down at the dog again. He lay back on his bunk and crossed his arms behind his head and stared at the ceiling. From his pocket, Carlson took a little leather thong or bag. He stooped over and tied it around the old dog's neck to make a leash. All the men except Candy watched him. Come on, boy," he said gently, and he said apologetically to Candy, "He won't even feel it." Candy did not move nor answer him. He twitched the leather rope thing. "Come on, boy." The old dog got slowly and stiffly to his feet and followed the gently pulling leash. So he's just a very sweet, calm dog. Slim said, "Carlson?" "Yeah?" "You know what to do." "What do you mean, Slim?" "Take a shovel," said Slim shortly. "Oh, sure, I get you." He led the dog out into the darkness. George followed to the door and shut the door and set the latch gently in its place, so that maybe Candy couldn't hear it as well. He's kind of trying to be compassionate to him. Candy lay rigidly on his bed, staring at the ceiling. Slim said loudly, "One of my lead mule's got a bad hoof. Got to get some tar on it." He's leaving Candy kind of to feel his own pain. Maybe if he's going to cry, to give him some space and dignity so he can just kind of be by himself right now. His voice trailed off. It was silent outside. Carlson's footsteps died away. The silence came into the room, and the silence lasted. George chuckled. "I bet Lenny's right out there in the barn with his pup. He won't want to come in here no more now he's got a pup." Slim said, "Candy, you can have one of them pups you want." Candy did not answer. The silence fell in the room again. It came out of the night and invaded the room. George said, "Anybody like to play a little euchre?" So this is a really good personification, if we're looking at literary devices, that the darkness and the silence moved and filled up a space. "I'll play with a few with you," said Wit. They took places opposite each other. This is really interesting, right? We were talking about George playing solitaire, and now they kind of have this moment where they're all connecting over the loss of this dog. And so now George is opening up, and George is allowing this other ranch worker to play with him and to have some sort of connection with him. So that, if we're taking notes, that would be friendship, companionship, that change there. He rippled the edge of the deck nervously, and the little snapping noise drew the eyes of all the men in the room so that he stopped doing it. The silence fell in the room again. A minute passed, and another minute. Candy lay silently still, staring at the ceiling. Slim gazed at him for a moment and looked down at his hands. He subdued one hand with the other, that's a vocabulary word, and held it down. There came a little gnawing sound from under the floor, and all the men looked down toward it gratefully. Only Candy continued to stare at the ceiling. "Sounds like there was a rat under there," said George. "We ought to get a trap down there." So George is trying to kind of maybe take everyone's mind off it, maybe make it not so sad and gloomy in the room. Whit broke out. What the hell's taking him so long? Lay out some cards, why don't you? We ain't got no euchre played this way. George brought the cards together tightly and studied the backs of them. The silence was in the room again. A shot sounded in the distance. The men looked quickly at the old man. Every head turned toward him. For a moment he continued to stare at the ceiling. Then he rolled slowly over and faced the wall and lay silent. So he's lost his companion in life. Maybe lost his hope. George shuffled the cards noiselessly and dealt them. Whit drew a scoring board to him and set the pegs to start. Whit said, I guess you guys really come here to work. How do you mean? George asked. Whit laughed. Well, you come on Friday. You got 2 days to work till Sunday. I don't see how you figure, said George. Whit laughed again. You do if you've been around these big ranches much. Guy that wants to look over a ranch comes in Saturday afternoon. He gets Saturday night supper and 3 meals on Sunday, and he can quit Monday morning after breakfast without turning his head. But you come to work Friday noon, you got to put a day and a half no matter how you figure. George looked at him levelly. We're going to stick around a while, he said. Me and Lenny's got to roll up a steak. All right, so this means that George and Lenny want to save money so that they can get their ranch and their house and live independently, and they can achieve that American dream, which is if you work hard enough, you're able to be rewarded, have a house, have security. And so this would be a really good place for that. The door opened quietly, and the stable buck put his head, a lean Negro head lined with pain, the eyes patient. Mr. Slim? Slim licked his eyes from old candy. Huh? Oh, hello, Crooks. What's the matter? You told me to warm up tar for that mule's foot. I got it warm. Oh, sure, Crooks. I come right out and put it on. I can do it if you want, Mr. Slim. No, I'll come do it myself. He stood up. Crooks said, Mr. Slim? Yeah. That big new guy's messing around with your pups out in the barn. Well, he ain't doing no harm. I give him one of the pups. Just thought I'd tell you, said Crooks. He's taking 'em out of the nest and handling 'em. That won't do them no good. He won't hurt him, said Slim. I'll come along with you now. George looked up. If that crazy bastard's fooling around too much, just kick him out, Slim. Slim followed the stable buck out of the room. George dealt with and Whit picked up his cards and examined them. So let's think about this. The stable buck is the guy who works in the barn. He's the only black guy on the ranch. And Slim treats him well, right? He talks to him nicely, but Crooks is not welcome in the barn. I'm sorry, in the bunkhouse, which is where all the guys live and sleep. He has to be isolated and sleep in the barn, which, if we're looking at our themes, is a place to talk about or note on minorities and stereotyping and how he's treated differently because of his race and treated not as if he deserves as much as the other guys. George dealt and Whit picked up his cards and examined them. See the new kid yet? He asked. What kid? George asked. Why, Curly's new wife. Yeah, seen her. Well, ain't she a Lulu? Which means like she's kind of a tramp. I ain't seen that much of her, said George. He's kind of trying to just let it go, not engage. Whit laid down his cards impressively. Well, stick around and keep your eyes open. You'll see plenty. She ain't concealing nothing, which means hiding. She's right out in the open, flirting or kind of putting herself out there. I never seen nobody like her. She got the eye going all the time on everybody. I bet she even gives the stable buck the eye. I don't know what the hell she wants. George asked casually. Been any trouble since she got here? It was obvious that Whit was not interested in his cards. He laid his hand down and George scooped it in. George laid out his deliberate solitaire hand. So he's back now to being all alone and not playing with George. So he doesn't want to engage. He kind of goes back into that isolation, that solitary space, as soon as he feels threatened in achieving his dream or being seen badly, so he can't get that hope that he wants in the being independent with Lenny. 7 cards and 6 on top and 5 on top of those, kind of building a house of protection. Like if we're looking at that symbol, Whit said, I see what you mean. No, they ain't been nothing yet. Curly's got yellow jackets in his drawers, and that's all so far. Every time the guys is around, she shows up. She's looking for Curly, or she thought she left something or lying around, or she's looking for it. Seems like she can't keep away from guys. And Curly's pants is crawling with ants, and they ain't nothing come of it yet. So we're going to think also about minorities and stereotyping as how the guys look at Curly's wife, the only girl on the ranch. And they see her as loose or not respectable, not someone that they want to have a relationship with, but they make all these sorts of really harsh judgments on her without knowing her, right? Without really having a conversation with her. They make a lot of judgments about who she is based on what she looks like, how she dresses, how she talks. And so that would be kind of like that stereotyping theme for us if you want to start looking at that for Curly's wife as well. George said, she's going to make a mess. They's going to be a bad mess about her. She's a jailbait all set on the trigger. That Curly got his work cut out for him. Ranch with a bunch of guys on it. No place for a girl, especially like her, right? Judging her again based on how she's dressed or how she looks. Witt said, if you got ideas, you ought to come in town with us guys tomorrow night. Wow, what's doing? Just the usual thing. We go into Susie's place, hell of a nice place. Old Susie will laugh, always cracking jokes. Like she says when we come up on the front porch last Saturday night, Susie opens the door and then she yells over her shoulder, get your coats on, girls. Here comes the sheriff. She never talks dirty, neither. Got 5 girls there. So it's a prostitution house. Right? So it's kind of just this normal thing for these ranch guys to go into town and not have a relationship, but have like sex with these women and then leave. So there's still that idea of no companionship. They're choosing to be isolated, to not have an emotional connection. What's it set you back? George asked. How much do the women cost? $2.50. You can get a shot for 2 bits, like 2 cents, I think. Susie got nice chairs to set into. If a guy don't want to flop or have sex with a prostitute, why, he can just sit in them chairs and have a couple of or 3 shots and pass the time of day, and Susie don't give a damn. She ain't rushing guys through and kicking them out if they don't want to flop. Might go in and look the joint over, said George. Sure, come along. It's a hell of a lot of fun, just cracking jokes all the time. Like she says one time, she says, I knew people that if they got a rag rug on the floor and a Cupid doll lamp on the phonograph, they think they are running a parlor house. That's Claire's house she's talking about. So they think like if they dress up the prostitution house that it like makes it more respectable, is what they're saying. That's Claire's house. She says, my girls is clean, she says, and they ain't no water in my whiskey, she says. So she's like more of a respectable business than she is trying to like put on a different like vibe than really is happening. If any of you guys want to look at a Cupid doll lamp and take your own chance getting burned or get like an STD, why, you'd know where to go. And she says, there's a guy around here walking bow-legged because they look like they like to look at a Cupid doll lamp. So like he made himself sick with an STD because he thought like the nicer decorations made a nicer prostitution house or experience. George said, Claire runs the other house, huh? Yeah, said Witt. We ain't never go there. Claire gets $3 a crack and 35 cents a shot, and she don't crack no jokes. But Susie's place is clean, and she got nice chairs. Don't let no goo-goos in neither. Me and Lenny's rolling up a steak, said George. I might go and set and have a shot, but I'm putting out no 2.50. So George is really focused on this American dream and getting his own ranch, and he's not as interested in what the other guys are of just like having a good time, just living for the present, living in the moment. So American dream and sort of companionship here. He's not needing companionship of the women. He's got Lenny, you know. Well, a guy got to have some fun sometimes, said Witt, because they're in the Great Depression. They're feeling this sadness, you know. The door opened and Lenny and Carlson came in together. Lenny crept to his bunk and sat down, trying not to attract attention. Carlson reached under his bunk and brought out his bag. He didn't look at old Candy, who still faced the wall. Carlson found a little cleaning rod in the bag and a can of oil. He laid them on his bed and then brought out the pistol, took out the magazine, and snapped the loaded shell from the chamber. Then he fell to cleaning the barrel with the little rod. When the ejector snapped, Candy turned over and looked for a moment at the gun before he turned back to the wall again. So Carlson's cleaning the gun that he just shot Candy's dog with, like right in front of him, not really recognizing what he's just done. Carlson said casually, "Curly been in yet?" "No," said Whit. What's eating on Curly?" Carlson squinted down the barrel of his gun. "Looking for his old lady. I seen him going round and round outside." Whit said sarcastically, "He spends half his time looking for her and the rest of the time she's looking for him." Curly burst into the room excitedly. Remember, he's the really aggressive guy. "Any of you guys seen my wife?" he demanded. "She ain't here," said Whit. Curly looked threateningly about the room. "Where the hell's Slim?" Kind of maybe suspecting Slim of being with her. I don't know. "Went out in the barn," said George. "He was going to put some tar on a split hoof." Curly's shoulders dropped and squared. How long ago he'd go? 5-10 minutes. Curly jumped out the door and banged it after him. Wood stood up. "I guess maybe I'd like to see this," he said. "Curly's just spoiling or he wouldn't start for Slim. And Curly's hand goddamn handy. Got in the finals for the Golden Gloves. He got newspaper clippings about it." He considered, "But just the same, he'd better leave Slim alone. Nobody knows what Slim can do." Another place for good characterization for Slim. "Thinks Slim's with his wife, don't he?" said George. "Looks like it," Whit said. "Course Slim ain't. Least I don't think Slim is. But I like to see the fuss if it comes off. Come on, let's go." George said, "I'm staying right here. I don't want to get mixed up in nothing. Lenny and me's got a stake." So, again, focusing really hard on his American dream and not focusing on, like, the present pleasure like the other guys are. Carlson finished the cleaning of the gun and put it in the bag and pushed the bag under his bunk. "I guess I'll go out and look her over," he said. Old Candy lay there, and Lenny from his bunk watched George cautiously. When Whit and Carlson were gone and the door closed after them, George turned to Lenny. "What you got on your mind?" "I ain't done nothing, George. Slim says I better not pet them pups so much for a while. Slim says I ain't good for them, so I come right in. I've been good, George." "Like a child." "I could have told you that," said George. "Well, I wasn't hurting 'em none. I just had mine in my lap petting it." George asked, "Did you see Slim out in the barn?" "Sure I did. He told me I better not pet them pup no more." "Did you see the girl?" "You mean Curly's girl?" We can look at minorities and stereotyping again because we don't see her name. She's just that girl, and, that Curly owns her. "Yeah, did she come in the barn?" "No, anyways, I never seen her." "You never seen Slim talking to her?" She ain't been in the barn." "Okay," said George. "I guess them guys ain't gonna see no fight. If there's any fighting, Lenny, you keep out of it." "I don't want no fights," said Lenny. He got up from his bunk and sat down at the table across from George. Almost automatically, George shuffled the cards and laid out his solitaire again, even though Lenny's there. He used a deliberate, thoughtful slowness. Lenny reached for a face card and studied it, then turned it upside down and studied it. "Both ends the same," he said. "George, why is it both ends the same?" "I don't know," said George. "That's just the way they make 'em. What was Slim doing in the barn when you seen him?" "Slim?" "Sure. You seen him in the barn and he told you not to pet the pups so much." "Oh, yeah. He had a can of tar and a paintbrush. I don't know what for." "You sure that girl didn't come in there like she come in here today?" "No, she never come." George sighed. "You give me a good whorehouse every time," he said. "Guy can go in and get drunk and get everything out of his system all at once and no messes, and he knows how much it's going to set him back. These here jailbaits is just set on the trigger of the hoosegow." So, a girl who's not a prostitute is more dangerous. Lenny followed his words admiringly and moved his lips a little to keep up. George continued, "You remember Andy Cushman, Lenny? Went to grammar school?" "The only one that his old lady used to make hotcakes for the kids?" Lenny asked. "Yeah, that's the one. You can't remember anything if there's anything to eat in it." George looked carefully at the solitaire hand. He put an ace up on his scoring rack and piled the 2, 3, and 4 of diamonds on it. "Andy's in San Quentin right now on the account of a tart," said said George. So, like a tramp kind of girl. Mm. Huh? George, how long it gonna be till we get that little place and live on the fat of the land and rabbits? That's their American dream. I don't know, said George. We gotta get a big stake together. I know a little place we can get cheap, but they ain't giving it away. Old Candy turned over slowly. His eyes were wide open. He watched George carefully. Lenny said, Tell about that place, George. I just told you just last night. Go on, tell again, George. Well, it ain't 10 acres, said George. Got a little windmill, got a little shack on it, and a chicken run. Got a place for alfalfa and plenty of water to flood it. There's a pig pen. And no rabbits, George? No place for rabbits now, but I could easy build a few hutches, and you could feed alfalfa to the rabbits. Dan right I could, said Letty. You goddamn right I could. George's hands stopped working with the cards. His voice was growing warmer. And we could have a few pigs. I could build a smokehouse like the one Grandpa had, and when we kill a pig, we can smoke the bacon and the hams and make sausage and all that. And when the salmon run upriver, we could catch 100 of 'em and salt 'em down or smoke 'em. We could have them up for breakfast. They ain't nothing so nice as smoked salmon. When the fruit come in, we could can it, and tomatoes, they're easy to can. Every Sunday we'd kill a chicken or a rabbit. Maybe we have a cow or a goat, and the cream is so goddamn thick you could cut it with a knife and take it out with a spoon. So he's talking about this beautiful dream they have together to live so well with each other in the middle of the Great Depression. Sure, said George, and all kind of vegetables in the garden, and if we want a little whiskey, we can sell a few eggs or something, or some milk. We'd just live there. We'd belong there. There wouldn't be no more running around the country and getting fed by a Jap cook. No, sir, we'd have our own place where we belonged and not sleep in a bunkhouse. So that's their dream, right? Tell about the house, George, Lenny begged. Sure, we'd have a little house and a room to ourselves, a little fat iron stove, and in the winter we'd keep a fire going in it. It ain't enough land, so we'd have to work hard too, maybe 6 or 7 hours a day. We wouldn't have to buck no barley 11 hours a day, and when we put in a crop, why, we'd be there to take the crop in. Why, we'd know what we came out of our planting. So they'd be permanent, and they'd have something to show for all their work. And rabbits, Lenny said eagerly, and I'd take care of them. Tell how I'd do that, George. Sure, you'd go out in the alfalfa patch, and you'd have a sack. You'd fill up the sack and bring it in and put it in the rabbits' cages. They'd nibble on it, and they nibble, said Lenny, the way they do. I've seen them. Every 6 weeks or so, George continued, them does would throw a litter, so we'd have plenty of rabbits to eat and to sell, and we'd keep a few pigeons to go flying around the windmill like they'd done when I was a kid. He looked raptly at the wall over Lenny's head. And it'd be our own, and nobody could can us or fire us. We done like a guy, we said, get the hell out. And the guy's got to do it. And if a friend come along, why, we'd have extra bunk. We'd say, why don't you spend the night? So they'd have more companionship if they have this dream. And by God, he would. We had a setter dog and a couple striped cats, but you got to watch out. Them cats don't get to the little rabbits. Lenny breathed hard. You just try to let them get the rabbits. I break their goddamn necks. I'll smash them with a stick. He subsided, grumbling to himself, threatening the future cats which might dare to disturb the future rabbits. George sat entranced with his own picture. When Candy spoke, they both jumped as though they had been caught doing something reprehensible. Candy said, You know where's a little place like that? George was on guard immediately. Suppose I do, he said. What's that to you? You don't need to tell me where it's at. Might be any place. Sure, said George. That's right. You couldn't find it in 100 years. Candy went on excitedly. So that theme of like scared of his hope, of his dreams lost or his hope lost. Candy went on excitedly. How much they want a place for like that? George watched him suspiciously. Well, I could get it for $600. The old people that owns it is flat bust, and the old lady needs an operation because of the Dust Bowl and the Depression again. Say, what's it to you? You got nothing to do with us. Candy said, I ain't much good with one hand, but I lost my hand right here on this ranch. That's why they give me a job swamping. And they give me $250 because I lost my hand, and I got 50 more saved up right in the bunk right now. That's $300, and I got 50 more coming the end of the month. Tell you what, he leaned forward eagerly. Suppose I went in with you guys. That's $350 I'd put in. I ain't much good, but I could cook and tend the chickens and hoe the garden some. How'd that be? So he's hoping now too. He lost his companion, but now he's hoping to get more companions and that same dream that Lenny and George have. Candy interrupted him. I'd make a will and leave my share to you guys in case I kick off, because I ain't got no relatives nor nothing. You guys got any money? Maybe we could do it right now. George spat on the floor disgustedly. We got $10 between us. Then he said thoughtfully, look, if me and Lenny work a month, don't spend nothing, we'll have $100. That'll be $450. I bet we could swing her for that. Then you and Lenny could go get her started, and I'd get a job and make the rest, and you could sell eggs and stuff like that. They fell into a silence. They looked at one another amazed. This thing they had never really believed in was coming true. George sat reverently. Jesus Christ, I bet we could swing her. His eyes fell in wonder. I bet we could swing her, he said softly. All right, so we're going to stop there, and we're going to pick it up tomorrow with a journal, and we're going to talk. You guys are going to follow up after finishing this video of me reading to you with 3 annotations about those themes that I talked about: broken plans, the American dream, friendship and companionship, minorities and stereotyping. Make sure that you use one of these skills. You tell me in your note which of the themes you're using, and you finish the sentence starter. So you're doing 3 annotations to finish up this reading, and we're going to pick up with these next few pages together. Thanks, guys.